word on the street is you got some really cool antique arrowheads.
I think so. I got most of these in China. There obviously some of them are in very rusty condition. Like obviously that one's in real rusty condition. Because a lot of them I got from farmers when I was in China. So they just found these in their fields, and so they sometimes they'd have a pile of them, and I'd sift through and find the ones that were the least corroded shape. But I think they're pretty cool. Check that out.
Yeah. That's really wild that this is like their payday, probably. They're like,
right. Well,
not for
the price they were selling them. But,
oh, really?
But they probably got, I don't remember what I paid for them, but they weren't expensive at all.
You guys heard that first. China's the way to go.
It was a long time ago, though. I don't think you could go into the flea markets and find these anymore. But back then, yeah, you could do it. This was years ago.
Yeah. So this one's really interesting. It's relatively wide. What do you think this would have been used for?
Well, you notice that there's basically three types.
Yeah.
There's broadheads, if you want to have a large categorization. There's whistlers. There's then these, real needly ones. And then there's specialty ones. So I guess you could say there's four categories. There's weird specialty ones. So I think these, my impression is, well, one like that, would you hold on to that one? And, all these ones you call broad, like that's, I'd have to call that a broadhead, but it's not, it's maybe a wide head or not as fat head, right? Because it's not as wide. So I think all of these ones were for close in. I mean, here's another one. I mean, look at the shape of that, right? That's a very interesting kind of shape, right? Because like that one that you got, that would cut a lot better, I think, right? And if you think of it sort of like ballistics and bullets, I think that kind of shape, we have others very similar kind of shape that are, more of a fat triangle on the front, sort of a kite shape, those ones, right? Those kind of ones, I think they're going to cut in, but they're going to hit hard too, right? I mean, don't you think?
Yeah. And curiously, like this shape of, may I see that one as well?
Yeah, see, that one's pretty close. Those two are pretty close.
This shape has been around since at least the 13th century.
Oh, definitely.
In Mongolian art.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've seen people selling them online. I bought a few here, and I forget which ones I got where now because I've had these for years. But you see people selling them and saying that they're Mongol. And I just don't believe that because these are steel and they're rusted away.
Yeah.
they didn't, the few they find at Kalka River are like, these are pretty rough. Those make these look like Ferraris, so you're absolutely right. This design hasn't changed. I would say, when I've bought a couple that were advertised as Mongol, I'd say, no, those are Manchu period.
Yeah. So you would say that these are all basically from Qing period?
Yes, I would, I'm certain actually that they're all Qing period. Okay. Besides the fact that most of them came from China, the few that I bought online, and I honestly don't remember which ones were which now, that were advertised as Mongol, I don't believe it. You can see in the Huangqiao Liqi Tushi, the illustrated regalia for the dynasty, basically, you see all the same heads. So there's no question that these types were used during the Qing period. And it's 64 different types of arrows.
Wow.
So we don't have 64 types here at all.
So awesome. Let's go through some of these and let the viewers see some of them and explain what they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what do you like to see first?
Okay. First of all, what is this?
Right.
Is this a pitchfork?
It's a good question. What is this? This is a swallowtail. And it said that this is for shooting small game.
Okay.
Again, look at the encyclopedia. It tells you what each one of these things are for. Yeah. And they're absurdly specific. Some of the things in that encyclopedia of those 64 types, I think you have a hard time finding them. There's one for shooting rabbits, for example, that has a head, has a whistle, and has kind of tines coming out like this from the side. And if you've ever shot, I've lost arrows shooting at rabbits. It's terrible when you're a teenager and your, arrows back then were probably cost me $7 a pop, which was a lot for a teenager, in the 70s. And it goes underneath the sod and you'll never see that arrow again. You can see why they did that. If you had to make things out of wood and slowly make them, right, that would catch and not go in. And I think that's the same thing with this one. I mean, if you're shooting at small game, you don't have to penetrate very far to take it out, and that would stop. And if you hit brush, it doesn't
anyone who
Where's my
shot
arrow, man?
knows as soon as your arrow skips, it goes
Right.
wherever it wants.
And arrows cost money.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
it's expensive.
I mean, imagine that was hand forged,
Yeah,
right? It wasn't made with a CNC or something, right? And just crank it out. The other thing I saw there was on, was a Todd's Workshop channel.
yeah,
He did a very interesting thing as a very similar European
yeah,
head, and they use it for hunting ducks in it. So like you just said, they'll skip.
yeah.
It skipped along the water. So maybe the Manchus use them that way as well. I don't know. I haven't seen a mention of that, but it wouldn't surprise me because it's a small game head,
Yeah.
right? So that's it. I would say of the different categories, we have these ones that I would say are really specialized, like that rabbit one I mentioned, and this one is a small game one. This is the only one I ever found like this, though.
Really?
Yeah.
So you think they would ever use this in battle at all? Or?
No, I don't think that was a battle one at all.
Okay.
Because what would that do if it hit you?
I don't know.
I mean, it would hurt.
Yeah.
But if you had armor on,
Yeah.
that's just going to bend and break.
Yeah.
You know. So no, I wouldn't say that's military. So I'd say that's purely hunting.
Okay.
And I think the same deal here. This is a really odd one.
That is wicked.
This one also paid a pretty penny for because I got it off of a dealer, and it's really kind of fragile. It's in the box. I keep them in as flakes of rust.
Yeah.
Got to be careful with this one.
This is nuts. This is a lot like the modern triple-bladed broadheads used for hunting.
Except look how dull the tip is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you got a little point there. I think this is a small game head.
Okay.
Right? Because if you ever shot small game, it doesn't take much to finish them, right? Even the shock pretty much does them in. And you don't want to damage the meat. You don't really want to slice it apart.
Yeah.
You just want to kill it and get it, you know? So I think it's the same thing. I think this is, although these are blades and they're corroded, so you can't really feel it. And it's relatively thin.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And it would have been thicker, of course. You know,
yeah, we have no idea how much.
Without the arrested oxidation it's now covering the surface. But if you look at it from sort of this point of view, it's a little bit of a point, but that's very blunt in a way. So that's going to really bang and hit. So I don't think this one was probably meant to pierce. I think it was for small game, rabbits, fox, right? And remember, Manchus primarily were hunting from horseback.
Yeah.
You know, the aristocracy, you know, those who had the money, who had horses, the upper class would have been hunting from horseback primarily. Commoners hunted on foot, right? And there were plenty of commoners, so we tend to think of them as mounted archers, but there are plenty of guys on foot. But again, if you've ever done any field shooting or hunting, you lose arrows, and you don't want to lose arrows.
Yeah.
So definitely a poor guy hunting for sustenance doesn't want to lose his arrows. And a rich guy's arrows are even more expensive because they've got fancy feathers and stuff. You don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. Yeah. If this hits the ground, it's like
it's not going to go very, it's going to stick. It's not going to go very far. And it's, you know, shock.
Yeah.
Hit something. Hits an animal, small animal. But I think these kind are really interesting too.
Yeah. These are chisels.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, if you take a modern day carpenter's chisel, it's the same profile.
Exactly. You know, these are, you know, because you can say, okay, we've got 4 categories, I'd say here, right? We've got these chisels or needly ones, right? That one's really corroded. We have the specialty ones. We've got whistles, right? So that one's got a whistle. That's a hazelnut.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that one.
That's a cool one. And then we got broadheads. And even amongst the broadheads, we have, you know, quite a variety as far as widths, you know, and shapes. So I think these are for your long distance arrows.
Okay.
You know,
that makes sense.
You know, take a one like this, that's a needle.
Yeah. Right.
It's light. So you can shoot it further.
Yeah.
So this is the arrow. I mean, imagine you're on horseback or even on foot, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The enemy's far away. You're shooting at them, right? Probably that's more the horsemen.
Yeah.
Right. They're riding in, If you look at how the formations were set up, they'd have usually typical guys with tongue pie and sabers in the front line. They'd have spearmen on the flanks, and they'd have gunners mixed in there as well. And you'd had also, but then the kind of behind them, so it's sort of like a D shape.
Yeah.
Instead of a wing shape, it was more of a D shape. Those archers could ride out and when they saw holes, right? So you'd have some gunners and some foot archers could maybe make a hole.
Yeah.
They'd go in. Their first shot, they might get as many as 5 shots riding forward. They're going to shoot those first shots. Going to have to be these like this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's whether you're on foot or on horse, and see that's good. I think that's an armor piercer.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, what do chisels do?
I mean, yeah, exactly. It's a chisel.
Yeah.
You know, I think of it in terms of like ballistics.
Yeah.
Right. A bullet can go through.
Yeah.
Or it can go in and knock you down.
Yeah.
And so I suspect, I mean, this is a supposition, but I suspect that all of these chisely ones, there's a wider one, will penetrate, but also knock you down. That's my guess. I mean, this is a guess, right? So you think that, as compared to that one you got, that will go in deeper. But what do you want? I mean, both are good.
Yeah, both are good. I mean,
both good shooting the other guy, right? I mean, there's another one that's obviously it's not easy to call plum blossom needles sometimes. Who knows? They may have pretty much the same effect, but they're lighter.
Yeah. Right.
So I think those are your distance arrows.
Yeah.
All right. Then as you get closer, we got broadheads. Like I was reading something the other day that it was, the Russian Empire and the Qing Empire clashed. They're two big empires next to each other. So the Russians would go on vacations and would be scouting Qing territory.
Yeah.
And I think it was in 1858, one of the reports back from a Russian officer said that the Qing worked in 3-man groups. And it was an archer, a man with, they said a glaive. Often those are just described as Chang Da Dao. If you look at, I think probably like that Pu Dao back there. I think a lot of people think there would be like what people commonly call Guang Dao, but that would be a Lin Yue Dao in the manuals. But thinking, you look at the illustrations, you see many more of those. And I think that's a little bit more versatile weapon because of its balance. So one man with that, and one man with a shield, a rattan shield, a tongue pie, and a saber. And I think that's telling us you got archers on the front line, right? Because it's not like, okay, we're up front with our swords.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be up front. You'd be in the back with a bow.
Yeah. I'm for the back, man.
You're probably smarter. It's a lot smarter. Be in the back. So you would almost be an officer then. So you currently dress much like an officer, right? So you'd be in the back. It's not like that, where you're just lofting arrows.
Yeah.
And going forward. They're moving forward together, right? And I'm pretty sure that you would think about yourself in this circumstance. And it's hard to get sometimes to find a period source that really tells us this kind of thing. But you have your bow holster, right? So you have your bow holster and your quiver. A lot of arrows in there. It's not so hard to load one side with arrows like this and the other side with arrows like that. Because there's also records, I was reading one, I can't remember the title of the book now. It was a diary, and the guy's talking about shooting. It sounds like he's shooting people at like 2 meters away.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Talk about speed shooting.
Yeah, speed shooting. Well, but if you got, think about, right? Like, okay, you got that, you got your bow, I've got my saber and a shield, and I'm dealing with a guy. I've got another guy maybe with a spear, with one of those big Pu Dao.
Yeah.
And you're just there. And I may be dealing with this guy, and you see a guy about where the camera is.
Yeah. Yeah. You're my covering fire.
Right,
and I'm
exactly.
just going to come out and
you just bang, you just hit him, right? And so we're actually we're working together.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I may be more trying to keep this guy at bay, not being too aggressive, Got my shield up, and I'm keeping him covered.
Yeah.
And you're just looking for that opening. I think you probably wouldn't even go full draw a lot.
Yeah.
You're just tung.
Yeah.
And if you hit it with that,
it's a big boy.
Yeah.
This is like the
hollow
point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the hollow point of arrows, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's your full metal jacket.
Yeah.
Right? That's your distance. These are your hollow points, right? And look at that. That curve, let me check that one out. So compare those. See? This is where, who knows? We have to get some gel sometime and test.
Yeah.
But this doesn't, to me, I don't think that wouldn't penetrate as far.
That would make sense to me. You got the shoulder that comes out, and I would assume this would be sharpened.
Yes, yeah, of course,
These would be sharpened.
Yeah. You can see even in this condition, you can feel like, oh yeah, that comes down to an edge.
Yeah.
And this one is interesting. If you look closely, I haven't polished any of these. When you see them polished up, they're forged blades.
Okay.
With a hardened edge. probably not all of them were that way. The better quality ones were. We don't have enough to do a proper study where we could let's polish 300 of them and take a look, and acid treat them and all. But you can see here, there's a little. You can see where the hardened edges because a little forging flaw. So you can see that little crack there, kind of that flaw where it's not sealed. That's a hardened edge.
Yeah.
So that's going to really cut in. I think that at that kind of range, maybe it would go through armor.
Yeah.
Cloth and through cloth. That's the big thing. Getting through cloth.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's difficult, right?
Now, I know it looks big, guys, and you can obviously see there's a big size difference, but this weighs probably 4 times as.
Yes, it's quite heavy, right?
It's heavy.
Right. And I think, so I know indoor archers tell me they have used heavier heads than people shooting in the field, and because it straightens your arrow out more quickly.
Yep.
So you can see, right, if you're there, and when the enemy's, okay, they're at 50 meters coming in, we may shoot, you see, that's an enemy commander.
Yeah.
Everybody aim, 3 or 4 of us aim at that guy. Somebody's going to hit him somewhere, right? Or we may shoot up, let it come down on somebody's foot, you know? I mean, that's bad, right? Getting in the foot. But when they're close, okay, we go to the other side of the quiver, pull out that, and it's going to straighten out pretty quick.
Yeah.
I mean, a heavy head like that might straighten out in 3 to 5 meters.
Yeah.
Whereas that may not be, and it might glance or not impact the way you want. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I agree. Because you have a higher forward of center mass, it's gonna have more momentum up there and inertia, so it's gonna straighten the tail out a lot faster. Yeah. Well, you guys have seen me shoot crazy heavy arrows, and they're pretty much straight without fletchings. So as long as everything is nice and balanced on your shaft and your head, it's pretty effective. If you have a heavy head like this, it doesn't take 10-15 meters for everything to shake out and straighten up.
So that's your experience.
Yeah,
matches up with my thinking here. We're talking about shafts. We should look at those. But so you look at this is a pretty late arrow.
Yeah.
But if you look at that head, I mean, that's very triangular. But take a look at that.
It is basically blunt.
Exactly.
It's
exactly.
Thicker than a Snickers.
So I'm thinking, I don't know for certain, but that might also have been for armor piercing. It's kind of between the two, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like that's a long distance arrow, right? As a 3-sided, that would probably pierce, right? But not have a lot of knockdown.
Yeah.
It's going to ruin your day, though, have it stuck in you.
But, being so thick and relatively short, I would think that even if it doesn't penetrate armor, you're still absorbing all of that, right?
Yes, right.
And the armor of the time was brigandine, mail, maybe some lamellar left over from earlier.
The Qing, I don't think we really saw any lamellar, maybe really early on, or maybe with minorities.
Yeah.
Also leather lamellar, like, the E people, the peoples down in the Yunnan area.
Yeah.
Definitely. They used leather armor right through the pretty much modern times.
Yeah.
And it's hard leather. Hard leather is, it's not steel, but it's pretty damn tough.
It'll keep you alive.
It will, definitely. It's lacquered, so it stands up to the weather well. And it's thick, that stuff. I mean, it's not like one little thing of leather.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of these heads could pierce that leather stuff that I've seen, because that's like plate armor.
Yeah.
Brigandine replaced it.
Yeah.
Dingjia. And Ming were using that. The Qing just ran with it. They changed the style of the armor a little bit, but quite a lot. The Qing have more like your jacket.
Yeah.
And then tassets for the legs, whereas the earlier ones were like one big bathrobe kind of.
Yeah.
I've been able to see and handle plates from the period.
Yeah. From
the 18th century plates, and they're very thin.
Yeah.
The plate, those little dingjia plates. Dingjia means nail armor. They're about like this size. They're domed. They're just a few millimeters thick, but you cannot flex them. I mean, they're really tough and strong. They're treated. They're tempered steel.
Yeah.
They're really tough. So shock is important then.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not going to penetrate, you want to hurt them.
Yeah.
Right? So, you've shot heavy arrows. What do you think of that one on the end there? That's a period arrow.
This is a Let's see.
And I think this head is probably a later replacement. This is the quality of that barreled shaft. It's barreled both ways.
That is a very forward heavy arrow. Like it's and
it's about a quarter of the way down.
Yeah, it's a huge head, but it's relatively thin.
Yeah, I don't think that's an original head. I think that was put on later at some point.
Okay.
Because look at this, which is, see, that I think that's an earlier shaft.
Yeah.
They get the Qing arrows, you get these, you see earlier on, you can look at the paintings and a few existing arrows like from Qianlong period.
Yeah.
You see the fletching fits inside the brace height.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in the paintings and a few existing arrows. Later on, they get more extravagant like this one. So I think this is a pretty late one.
Yeah.
It's also lighter, right? This wouldn't, maybe shoot this with a 40-pound bow. What do you think?
Let me see.
I mean, weight-wise. Wow, you just feel the difference right away.
Yeah.
Like you hand me this one, it's like, this just feels so much more substantial.
This is probably, I would say, maybe a 50, 60-pound bow.
Is that as high as that?
But it depends on what kind of bow, right? If they're shooting Manchu bows, then you're probably right, 40 pounds, because they typically have to shoot heavier arrows with a large sea edge.
Right. And I think there's a lot of disagreement on the weights that Manchus shot. I don't believe they shot these super high weights. I think there's a confusion. If you look at the records, when they're testing men, it says the weight of the bow the guy opened, that's the strength testing bow. So he might have pulled a 100-pound or 120-pound pull bow.
Yeah.
But then that's not the bow they shot in the test.
Yeah.
That's a strength testing bow. And it specifically says, opened this bow, not shot this bow.
Yeah.
But I think also we have to remember that Manchus had different words for foot archery and mounted archery. So it seems that they looked at them as kind of different arts. Mm-hmm. And on horseback, you usually a lighter bow because you want to shoot more quickly, right? I mean, you're a much more experienced archer than I am. I'm a sometimes archer.
If you're getting up on a target on horseback and you're trying to get to full draw, you're going to miss because by the time you get to full draw.
Yeah, you're trying to get a 100-pound pull bow back or heavier on that.
Yeah.
And also there was a memorial, an edict rather, from the Yongzheng emperor that said not to basically, don't force people to use what they call hard bows. They're very heavy bows. Yeah. That 70 pounds was enough. Because it leads to problems. You can hurt yourself. So I think, there's always the exceptional guy who can shoot some absurdly heavy bow. I think most people were shooting in the 70, 90-pound range. Yeah. And I suspect that mounted archers were probably in 50 to 60.
Yeah, I do agree. I think there's a kind of romanticism when it comes to historical archery.
Yes. They were all great, strong men.
Yeah, I'm like, but
could lift up a camel and throw it over the wall.
When you think about how many hundreds of thousands of archers there were, especially in the East, because archery was a big thing in the East, right? It wasn't like a specialized thing. It's like if you have an army, you can have crossbowmen, you can have archers, you can have musketeers later on. Right. So you're not telling me that every one of those dudes or like even a majority of those dudes were pulling super heavy bows.
No.
That's not sustainable.
It's like thinking of soldiers today. You can't go and say, oh, well, Navy SEALs could, shoot an eagle out of the sky at 1,000 meters. It's like, all right, cool. But your average soldier can barely get out of bed in the morning, right?
Yeah.
So I think you're right. It tends to be this romanticization.
I don't know if this is true, guys. You guys correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. I don't believe, has anyone ever measured Manchu bow from the Qing period? Like, have there been examples where they've strung them up and actually measure how heavy?
Good question. I honestly don't know. I think there probably has been people who've done them. My question there would be, we see the same kind of thing with swords. Yes. That people tend to, there's what I would call dojo lore, right? Where people say, for example, a sword was like this long, etc. The common one is, okay, it should come up to your ear. But when you look at hundreds and thousands of swords, I've been very fortunate to handle several thousand swords. Yeah. You see, that's not the case at all. Yeah. So I'm afraid that how many bows have we had to look at? Yeah. Because bows are organic material. Yes. They don't survive. Yeah. So we can look at, say 100 bows even. Yeah. That are soldiers' bows. Yeah. Because the bows that I think a lot of the bows that we see that remain are the upper class bows that were better cared for. Yeah. So that's, I think, what we get in a problem sometimes in this. So we'd like, if we can get 100, 200, or it better be 300 bows that are the type, like this was the guy in the front or the archers who, really did the work, not the guy who stood in the back and gave orders.
Yeah.
Then I think we can start to probably draw those kinds of conclusions.
Yeah, there's obviously
If somebody's already done that, please let us know and give us the link.
Yeah, there's obviously going to be some survivorship bias, right?
Yeah.
Especially with weapons and antiques, because like you said,
Right.
the guy who's not shooting his bow is probably well taken care of. It's not had a lot of stress put on it.
Mhm.
The dude in the front line, I mean, that bow might not even survive the battle.
Right.
Now, going back to these arrows, one
Yeah.
thing I did notice that they are tapered at the ends.
Barreled both ways.
Barreled, yeah. So
I think you can really see it on
they got a
the
really thick center.
It
These look like,
tapers, thickens, and tapers again. Yeah.
these things look properly made, which again goes back to the weights.
Yeah.
How heavy of a bow could you comfortably shoot like these arrows in without worrying about it blowing up, right? Because again, like you said, not everyone probably would have shot a heavy bow. And if you were shooting heavy bows, you'll need a lot heavier arrows. I mean, you have these arrowheads that are super heavy. I'd probably say this is maybe 400 grains, maybe. The shaft, maybe another 300-400 grains.
And these are, from Qing times.
Yeah.
I'm sure they've lost some weight.
Yeah.
So dried out. So you got to have add 50 grains, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess there.
I guess we don't have enough arrows here to make a informed conclusion.
No, don't.
But based on these arrows, I mean, you had to have hatch lighter bows because these, even if they were full and they weren't, decayed over time, maybe 850, 900 grains. And Manchu bows required usually 15 to 20 grains per pound. How heavy of a bow did you need to shoot this?
Yes, I think that's a very good point. This is you definitely have to say this is a very small sample.
Yes.
I have some others like this. They're all essentially the same.
Yeah.
We need to have a much bigger sample.
Yes.
But to your point, once I was discussing with somebody and they said, oh, their arrows weighed X amount.
Yeah.
And so I took out this arrow and weighed it and said, oh, well, here's another data, here's another data point. I weighed it. And he said, that's ridiculous. That arrow would blow up if you shot it with a 100-pound bow. And I was like, yeah, that's the point.
Yes.
If you're saying that everybody was shooting 100, 120-pound pull bows, and I have several of these arrows, this is one out of the collection, then clearly not everybody was shooting a 100-pound pull bow.
Yeah.
So I think that could be mounted versus infantry on foot.
Hunting as well.
Or hunting, yes. But we need to be a little more sophisticated in our look at this and not just kind of think everybody did one thing.
Yeah.
Because to shoot faster on a horse, you need a lighter draw.
Yeah.
What that was exactly, let's go. And again, I think we can't romanticize it.
Yeah.
If you find edicts from the emperor telling the trainers not to force the troops to shoot hard bows.
Yeah.
And that, 70, I forget exactly what, 70-something pounds was enough. I don't think the trainer said, screw that, we're going to shoot 120-pound bull bows. Who cares what the emperor says?
You won't be trained for long.
Right, exactly. And this was at a time when the empire was still really strong and seriously training people. So we have to take all this data and not just cherry pick what we like.
Yeah.
So I was reading another day anticipating your visit, and I came across something, and I did the numbers here real quick. So in the Qing army, so how big was the Qing army? Because I think this really affects arrowhead production, right? So in the 18th century, they had an army of about 800,000 men.
Holy crap.
It's a lot of men, right? It was the biggest army in the world at the time, in Qianlong's army. And about 200,000 of those were bannermen, right? Which meant that 600,000 of them were not Manchus, they were the Green Braves, the Han ethnic majority, right? And 40 to 50% of the Manchus, of the bannermen, were archers.
Okay.
About 50% of the Green Braves had matchlocks.
Yeah.
Right? So this is interesting because we think of the Qing army, there are all these archers, they're this mobile army, kind of think sort of like the Mongols, right? Of the much earlier medieval time. But that means actually there were approximately 100,000 archers, which is it's a lot of arrows, and 300,000 gunners.
Okay.
So there were 3 times as many gunners in the Qing army. So when you start thinking about that, it's like how many arrows a man on campaign needs.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that really starts to inform, like, when we're looking at these things, these are a lot cheaper to make.
Yeah.
You know, I bet you, the ones that get preserved, that someone's going to hang on to is a cool whistle head like that.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not going to shoot that.
Are they going to hang on to that as much or be careful? I mean, obviously this is somewhat subjective, but I bet you when you have 100,000 archers who need how many arrows to go on campaign?
Yeah.
At least 100 per man. What's the math on that?
I'm sorry, I'm not.
I think that's 10 million. Am I right? Somebody. Yeah, it was 10 million. That's a lot of arrows. These had to all be forged by hand.
Yeah.
Right. And you can forge these a lot quicker, right? And something like that, a lot quicker than you can these. So I think that's the kind of thing I think is really hard to know today. So that's kind of, I said, maybe that's a question for us. What is really the ratio?
Yeah.
These kind of things are more interesting. Maybe people hung on to them more. These things that we're finding in farmers' fields, if there was 100,000 archers and each needed X number of arrows, they might have had 3/4 of these, maybe.
Yeah.
Because the government's paying for them, right? It's not coming out of the soldier's salary. Officers would buy some nice kit for themselves.
Yeah.
But not these guys.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, also, these are very specific on when you would use them, right? If you're lobbing arrows, you're probably just going to grab this.
Right, yeah.
And if you guys look at Manchu quivers, they usually have dividers in them.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a really good way.
They have a divider in front and back, and then I think you can just on your own divide left and right.
Yeah.
So yes, and there of course often a little pouch on the back for whistles.
Yeah.
Which are for the officers. Right? The guys in the soldiers shooting don't bother with those. Those are officers to say, okay, pay attention over there.
So well, when we're talking about whistlers, here we have a form of whistling arrow.
Yeah.
This one does have a head on it. So would this be a military head or a hunting head?
This is a hazelnut head, which is for small game.
Okay.
But I think they're essentially the same. Those who've been hunting know a good trick is you can whistle.
Yeah.
And the animal, what's that?
Yeah.
So this is whistling for you. And the animal, I mean, hawks do that.
Yeah.
They make that screech and animals freeze for a second. Where's that coming from? Because animals, anybody who's hunting knows this, won't run until they know where the danger is coming from.
Yeah.
So when they hear that, they don't, where's that? And they want to look. And in that moment, the arrow hits them.
Yeah.
So this is a hunting head.
I mean, perhaps this could even be used for deer. Because every time, a lot of deer, they'll drop right as they hear something, like a gunshot. And usually they'll drop right into, if you're aiming with this, right into the...
It'll be good. I think that these, the military ones will basically be the same.
Okay.
Right? You want to whistle. You care less. If you're the commander and you want people to aim there, you can send a whistle there and it attracts attention.
Yeah.
And so that arrow is a signal arrow.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think you want a larger whistle. And there were I've seen some, unfortunately I don't have one to show you, but there's a variety of whistles. They're just whistlers.
Okay.
And they just...
All right, this one really stands out to me.
Yeah.
This is teeny tiny.
Yeah.
Is this like an target point, or what would this be?
That's a good question. It's 3-sided. And I think that's what we would probably call a flight arrow today.
Okay.
I think, yes, because, and it could actually be also from a child's bow.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, we got to think broadly, not box ourselves in. But I think that could be for a flight arrow.
Okay.
What we would call a flight arrow today, because that's for distance. It's so light that shooting this as a target arrow, or putting this on your target arrow, doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because what would be the median weight? Something like that, maybe, right? That's kind of in the middle. So if let's see, I mean, like these two are kind of about the middle of the road. If you take one of these chisels, okay, that's about the same weight as this one. Same thing there. These are all roughly about the same weight.
Yeah.
This is really light.
Yeah.
So this either has to have been on a child's bow, you know, or it's a flight arrow.
Yeah. A flight arrow for a flight Manchu bow.
Yeah.
I haven't even heard of that.
Well, there was, I forget the name of it now. There is an arrow in the 64. You can get my book on Amazon for about Manchu archery. It has all 64 in there, all translated. There was an arrow, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, that was essentially what we would call a flight arrow. So what we got to do next is we gotta test these things.
We do. I don't know if these are in the proper shape to test with, but luckily I've got some reproductions made.
And look at that. You got one.
I got one of those.
That's just like or very close to the swallowtail. Pretty close in weight.
Yeah.
I mean, just from feel, it feels the same. Cool. I'm going to skip that on the water.
Yeah. You know some ducks?
I can find some. And that is really, really, so look how close that is. That's very close.
Yep. I think I've got one of the diamonds as well.
Yep.
And I do believe I have a chisel back at home, but these are just some representatives.
Cool. So yes, that's the next video.
That sounds like
we'll have to go out and shoot these into a whole bunch of different things.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks for coming, man.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. Stay strong. Till next time we start shooting stuff. Stay strong, everybody. 再见.